Hello Penrith students, welcome along again. We are continuing with David Attenborough, Adventures of a Young Naturalist here. And just as a quick recap, in case you need it, young David Attenborough from the 1950s, he's travelled out with a film crew and some people from London Zoo, and they're looking to collect and discover new animals for the zoo. And he's filming them as part of his TV programme. And they're in British Guyana. They've arrived at this place, which is very much in a very remote place, and they're just trying to get ready for bed. And then very shortly you shall hear them capturing and meeting some of their first animals. So here we go. After the show, we went upstairs to our room. In it were 2 beds equipped with mosquito nets. 2 of us obviously had to sleep in hammocks, and Charles and I claimed the privilege. It was an opportunity which both of us had been thirsting to seize ever since we had bought our hammocks in Georgetown. With a highly professional air, we slung them from hooks fastened to the walls. The results, however, as we realised after a few weeks of experience, were hopelessly amateur. We had hitched them far too high and had tied them with enormously elaborate knots that were going to take Jack and take a considerable time to loosen in the morning. Jack and Tim stolidly climbed into their beds. The next morning there was little doubt as to which pair of us had spent the more comfortable night. Charles and I had both swore that we had slept like logs, and that sleeping in hammocks was second nature to us. But it was hardly true, for neither of us had learnt the simple technique of lying diagonally across the stretcherless South American hammock. I had spent most of the night trying to lie the length of it, with the result that my feet were higher than my head, and my body was slumped in a great curve. I had been unable to turn without breaking my back, and I got up that morning feeling that I should be afflicted with a permanent curvature of the spine. Let's move this one up a little bit. After breakfast, Teddy Melville came in with the news that a large party of Wapishana had started fishing in a nearby lake by the traditional method of poisoning its waters. There was a chance that in the process they would come across other animals which might be of interest to us, and Teddy suggested that we should go over and have a look. We got into his truck and set off across the savannas. There was little to prevent us from driving wherever we wished. Here and there were tortuously weaving creeks, but they were easily avoided, and we could see them from a considerable distance away, their banks being fringed by bushes and palm trees. Otherwise, the only obstacles in our way were clumps of stunted sandpaper bushes and termite hills. Tall, crazily spired towers, sometimes standing singly and sometimes concentrated in groups so dense that at times it seemed we were driving through a giant graveyard. A few well-beaten tracks across the savannas linked one branch to the next, but the lake we were to visit was isolated, and before long Teddy branched off the main trail and began threading bumpily between the bushes and the termite hills, following no track, but simply relying on his sense of direction. Soon we saw a belt of trees on the horizon, marking the site of the lake we were to visit. When we arrived, we found that a long arm of the lake had... There's a picture coming up on this next bit shortly, on the next page over, but we'll get there. That this lake had been dammed with a barricade of stakes. Into it, the Wapishana had crushed special lianas which they gathered many miles away in the Kanuku Mountains. All around were fishermen with bows and arrows at the ready, waiting for the fish to become stupefied by the poisonous sap of the lianas and float to the surface. That word stupefied is one you more often hear in Harry Potter, isn't it? But there you go, being used elsewhere. The Wapishana clung to the branches of the trees overhanging the lake's margin. They perched on specially built platforms in the middle of the water. Some stood on small improvised rafts, and others patrolled up and down in dugout canoes. In a clearing on the bank, the women had lit fires and slung hammocks, and now sat waiting to clean and cure the fish as soon as the men brought them in. But nothing so far had been caught, and the women were getting impatient. Their menfolk had been foolish, they said scornfully. Too big a section of the lake had been dammed, and too few lianas had been gathered in the forest, so that the poison was too weak to affect the fish. 3 days of hard work in damming and platform building had been wasted. Teddy talked to them in Wapishana and gathered all this information, as well as the news that one of the women had seen a hole in the bank on the other side of the lake, which she said was occupied by a large animal. What kind of animal it was, she was not sure. It might be either an anaconda or a caiman. The caiman belongs to the same group of reptiles as the crocodile and alligator, and to the layman all 3 animals look very much alike. To Jack, however, they were very different, and though all 3 are found in the Americas, they each have distinctive habits. Here on the Rupinini, I still can't pronounce that right, Jack said we could expect to find the black caiman, the largest species in its own group, which is reputed to grow up to 20 feet long. Excuse me a minute, move down a bit more. Jack admitted that he would rather like a nice big caiman, and, come to that, he would also be quite glad to catch a sizable anaconda. As to the animal in the hole might turn out to be one or the other, but he felt we really should try and catch it. We all climbed into dugout canoes and paddled across the lake with one of the women to guide us. Now here we go. Just so you can see what's going on there, you've got the one of the Wapishana standing on top of this almost this tripod thing they've built into the lake, and look, he's got his bow and arrow ready to start shooting the fish there as well. I mean, it's amazing when you think about it. It's very basic, but also it's something that's worked for thousands of years, and that's what they're discovering. And they really were some of the first people to go and film these native people in places like Guyana. So let's move on and find out what this animal is. On investigation, we found that there were two holes, a small one and a large one, and that they were connected with each other, for a stick pushed down the smaller one provoked splashes from the other. We barricaded the smaller hole with stakes. To prevent the unknown creature from escaping through the larger one, and, at the same time, to allow it enough space to emerge and be caught, we cut saplings from the bank and drove them deep into the mud of the lake bottom in a semi-circular palisade around the entrance. We had not yet seen our quarry, which is a nickname for like the person you're fighting is your quarry or your target. So we had not yet seen our quarry, and no amount of prodding through the smaller hole would drive it out. So we decided to enlarge the big hole by cutting through the turfy bank. Slowly we hacked away the roof of the tunnel, and as we did so, the bank shook with a subterranean bellow that could hardly have been produced by a snake. Cautiously, we peering out through the stakes of the palisade into, or what's it going to be? Peering out the palisade into a gloomy tunnel, I distinguished, half submerged in the muddy water, a large yellow canine tooth. We had cornered a caiman, and judging from the size of the tooth, a very large one. My little challenge for you today is when we finish this is go off and actually look up a caiman. Again, go onto Google, have a look at them, get some pictures, also of anacondas as well, and maybe even on YouTube you'll discover they are ferocious, and to actually consider even capturing one is just amazing, especially with very limited technology. So here we go, look, they're digging out the caiman so you can actually see the barricade that they've put up around to stop it escaping. Right. A caiman has two offensive weapons. First and obviously its enormous jaws, and second its immensely powerful tail. With either it can inflict very serious injuries, but fortunate the one we were tackling was so placed in its hole that we only had to pay attention to one end at a time. Having had a momentary glimpse of its teeth, I knew which end was uppermost in my mind. Jack was paddling about in the muddy waters inside the stakes, trying to work out how the caiman was lying and how best to tackle the job of catching it. It seemed to me that if the beast elected to come out in a hurry, Jack would have to jump very quickly to avoid losing a leg. For my part, I felt I was quite near enough to danger. Wading through thigh deep farther out in the lake, manoeuvring Charles in a canoe at a sufficient distance to get a good film shots of the proceedings. In the event of the caiman making a lunge at Jack, I was quite sure that it would come out with such a rush that it would knock our flimsy palisade flat, and whereas Jack could leap for the bank, I should have to wade several yards before I reached safety. I was in no doubt that the caiman, in such a depth of water, would be able to move faster than me. For some reason or other, perhaps my nervousness showed itself more than I imagined. I seemed unable to keep the canoe steady enough to make it practicable for Charles to work, and after I had given it a particularly violent lurch, which nearly threw him and his camera into the water, he decided that his apparatus would stand less chance of getting wet if he joined me wading in the lake. Meanwhile, Teddy had borrowed a rawhide lasso from one of the Wapishana, and he and Jack, kneeling on the bank, were dangling it in front of the caiman's nose in the hope that he might lunge forward towards Charles and me, and in doing so, thrust its head through the noose. It roared and thrashed the sides of its tunnel so violently that the whole bank quivered, but very sensibly it refused to come out any further. Jack cut more of the bank away, And very deliberately, I'm pausing that recording there, a nice 10 minutes, just so you might want to read on next time with me and see if and how they managed to capture this caiman. In the meantime, as I say, go off and have a quick look at a caiman and sort of whet your appetite, as the expression goes. But in the meantime, thanks for joining me, and hopefully you come back next time to see whether they're able to capture the caiman.